Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. It's Jerry Miller. It's good to be with you on a Tuesday across Charlottesville, Albemarle County, the Commonwealth, and frankly, the world. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am feeling fantastic. I know you are as well. The University of Virginia men's basketball team captures a national championship at a time where Charlottesville, Virginia undoubtedly needs this team to rise to the occasion. I think one thing I want to say about this UVA basketball team before we get to Brian Pinkston, who's running for Charlottesville City Council, is Tony Bennett and this men's basketball team have galvanized this community at a time where our community undoubtedly needed to be galvanized. I think we're going to look back at the 2018-2019 season, and we're going to look back at this year and this campaign and this men's basketball team, and we are going to say this club, this program, Tony Bennett and his boys have brought this community together. They have brought folks. During the Final Four, I was at a local watering hole, one of my favorites, Peloton Station, and I was looking across the entire watering hole, and I saw folks of every socioeconomic background, folks of every race, sitting in the bar, cheering for one common goal, cheering, giving each other high fives, chest bumps, just being on the same page, having fun, smiling, and that was a microcosm of what I think the future is going to be with Charlottesville as we return this fantastic community to its greatness and to its true form. And I want to salute Tony Bennett, and I want to salute this Virginia men's basketball team for a job well done at a time where Charlottesville undoubtedly has needed this team to rise to the occasion. My name is Jerry Miller. It's the I Love CVille Show. You can tell I am fired up. Before we get to Brian Pinkston, I want to give some love to the people that make this program possible. Intrastate Pest and Service Companies, a 4-generation strong business. 4 generations for Intrastate Pest and Service Company. They started with the first generation who had one truck, and this gentleman, Mr. Wells, would service his first customer of the day. And when he was done with his first customer of the day, he would go to a phone booth, and he would call the second customer and say, "Are you ready for me to come visit you and do pest control in your home?" Today, they're 4 generations strong with locations, ladies and gentlemen, in the Shenandoah Valley, right around the corner from Boden's on Harris, Richmond, Virginia, and a Commonwealth-wide footprint. It's Intrastate Pest and Service Companies, a home's best friend. We also give some big-time love to the good doctor, Scott Wagner, of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. He was in Minneapolis, along with Mr. Wells of Intrastate was in Minneapolis. And Dr. Wagner, guys, through chiropractic care, physical therapy, and sports medicine, is legitimately improving the lives of people across Central Virginia, one patient at a time. Who's got your back? Scott Wagner's got your back. We are proud to be the advertising agency of record for both Intrastate Pest and Service Company and Dr. Wagner, because these two businesses are making our community better every single day, just like Tony Bennett and this Virginia men's basketball team. Today's going to be a great show, man. It's going to be a great show. Harris Tolber, Judah Wickhauer, Lauren Linsky upstairs. They help keep us on air and make this show possible. Harris Tolber is our director. He has the hard job. Harris, I cannot wait to talk about that men's basketball team with you. I cannot wait to talk Brian Pinkston with you. And I think on that note, let's go to the studio cam, and let's welcome a sharp-dressed individual right here. His name is Brian Pinkston. He is running for Charlottesville City Council. I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to ask you what we start is the birth story, the evolution of Brian Pinkston. And we're not going to talk politics yet. We'll talk about you personally, you professionally, you as a family man. What motivates you, your hobbies, your passions, your interests, what you love about Charlottesville, the flip book of your life. The show is yours, Brian Pinkston.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful to be here, and thank you for all the good work that you do for the city. It's clear you do love CVille.
I do.
And yes, for the basketball team last night, that was really amazing. It seems like UVA's basketball team is intent on giving people like me over 40 a heart attack. Yeah, I'm Brian Pinkston. Just brief capsule of my life story. I grew up in a town called Albany, Georgia. So the deep south, the southwest part of Georgia, very conservative politically, religiously, but really was raised with a family that taught me to love my neighbor as myself, really built in me a strong sense of community, of caring for, of community. I'm an Eagle Scout, so participating in civic events like that was instilled in me from the very beginning. I went to Georgia Tech. Graduated in 1994 as a mechanical engineer. While I was at Georgia Tech, I had the honor of being able to what they call co-op. So basically, I would work a quarter and then go to school a quarter. And where I worked was a company called Procter & Gamble. The Procter, people have heard of P&G, of course, but P&G has a large mill in Albany, and they made, of all things, Bounty paper towels and Charmin toilet paper. And so when I was 18 or 19, I was thrown into this environment where these huge, amazing machines that made all this paper, this really vast place. But I was able to work with people from, like you said earlier, your watering hole example, from folks all over the world would come to this site. And we had, African Americans that worked in the area, blue collar. And for me, it was such a great place to start out. I've always been a very naturally curious person from as far back as I can remember, wanted to know why. It drove my parents crazy. But somewhere along the line, it was also connected to my faith as well. Somewhere along the line, I thought, if I really want to know the answers to my larger questions, I'm going to have to go back to school. And so I quit a really good job when I was 30, 2 kids at the time. A third was born in California. We moved to California. I did a theology degree out there in Southern California, which we had a really nice time there. And then came here in 2004 to do a PhD in philosophy. So I came here in 2004. Got a job, and I had 3 kids by that point, and the stipend from the philosophy department was generous, but not enough to fund a family. And so I got a job as a project manager using my engineering background, leveraging that, working for facilities management at the university. And so just a shout out to the fine men and women of facilities management at the University of Virginia who really keep that place going. There's over 1,200 people that do that. And so what I've done in the 14 years I've been here, in addition to writing my dissertation, is do lots of renovation work, managing people that do renovations, doing them myself, being a project manager. And I think being a project manager is a great sort of background for wanting to run for city council. Project managers put people, resources, and ideas together to get things done. Basically, my job every day is trying to reconcile different stakeholders who have different visions, different desires. We must always never have enough money or enough time. And so putting all that together is what I do every day.
I love it. Sizzle reel that, Harris Tolber. We're making sizzle reels here. A lot of people watching here. Let's give some props to the folks that are watching. Ray Cadell, Greg Rice, Sarah Hill Buczynski and Crozake, Mark Glickman, Barbara Lundgren, Brennan Rhodes. Love you, Brennan Rhodes. Good win for those Wahoos, Brennan Rhodes. Austin Morin, Keenan Miller, Kimmy Kruskamp, who's the chair, the head of the Greene County Chamber of Commerce. Ellen Markowitz, client and good friend of this company right here. What's up, Ellen? Go Western Albemarle Warrior girls tennis team. Abba Bello says, do a good job, bro. I'm praying for you as you venture into this. Nothing but support from Abba Bello.
Thank you, Abba.
Yeah, like and share the stream. We're putting Brian Pinkston in the positive spotlight. We'll talk about the campaign now. Okay. You are in the midst of a dogfight. Okay, it is a competitive dogfight. You have a number of competitors in this race for 3 city council spots. The June 11th primary will undoubtedly determine this. Yes, there is one independent in Bellamy Brown who has a very good chance of potentially winning a seat on council. I think in a lot of ways, you have the project management background that makes you unique. You have the activist and civic-minded background. You're very well-rounded. And I think that's very appealing. Let's talk about your campaign. Let's talk about the items that you stand for. Right.
So my campaign manager says never start something by saying right. So I'm going to start over. When someone asks, why are you going to run for city council? Why take on something like this? There's so many deep reasons you can talk about, so many profound reasons. But for me, it really comes down to 2 things. Seeing a need that I felt like needed to be filled, and also, I guess, a more atmospheric or philosophical one about the notion of the common good. So let me talk about this idea of the common good first. It's nothing rocket science. It's something we all believe in, I think, implicitly. But it's basically realizing, particularly in a town like Charlottesville, that we are all connected in deeply organic ways. So what happens to a young African-American student in the southern part of the city in terms of their home life and the support they get for preschool and things like that has an impact for a mother in Greenbrier who would like her child to stay in the public schools. It has an impact on employers in the future. So not only is it, for instance, the ethical thing to do to take care of everyone in our city, but it makes the most sense in terms of what's in each of our best interests as we seek the common good. And the common good is more than just street lights and roads, as important as those are. The common good is basically everything it takes for a city to thrive. So it's schools, it's the programs, it's the parks, it's where all of this comes together in a city budget. That's the common good. So in one way, it's very sort of ethereal and atmospheric and philosophical, but in another way, it really is where ideals meet pavement. Specifically, why I chose to get involved in the race, quite frankly, was that I felt like there needed to be, I felt like I offered a perspective and a voice, a point of view that would be helpful for the city. I've already highlighted my project management background. Specifically, after the 2016 election and some of the past there, I felt called, and then in August of 2017, just this strong desire to help this community. And so I've done my share of activism. I've been involved in local political campaigns. Kellen Squire, I'll do a shout out to Kellen. I've helped some, and I've also been on the Charlottesville Democrats as a precinct captain. So I've done my share of political engagement and activism, but what I hope to bring is the sort of empathetic, compassionate perspective that has, with also just a very reasonable, thoughtful, reflective, managerial approach to getting things done. So if you want to call it head matched with, or heart matched with head, I think that's something that I bring uniquely. And I also have worked in a lot of different contexts. I've worked in the Deep South. I spent some time in Northwest England. I've worked in the Mid-Atlantic as well as in Southern California. I've worked in different contexts and milieus, academia, construction, manufacturing. And so I'm older than I look.
I say you look 38 years old.
I'm 47.
Okay, well, you're looking good, man.
Yeah.
You're aging well, dude.
Yeah.
Megan Payne, thank you for joining us. Josh Elwood, thank you for joining us. Like and share the feed wherever you're watching, whatever 7 channels you're watching on the I Love CVille network. It's not often we get an engineer who's into theology and philosophy.
Yeah.
I mean, put that in perspective for us. I mean, that's both sides of the brain there, baby.
It is indeed, baby. Right. In a way, it seems disparate. In a way, it's not. Right. It's all about
challenging yourself.
Yeah, it is challenging. Certainly, it is that. But I went to Georgia Tech initially. I'm not one of these people that grew up taking cars apart and all that. I wish I was. I figured some of that stuff out as I've gone along, but. I went to Georgia Tech because I loved math and science and physics. I loved to see how that worked. And then, and this was particularly connected to my faith, I wanted to understand how my ideas of God fit into all these things, my ideas of how I related to my neighbor fit into all these things, and for me in particular, Scripture. And so trying to sort all these things out led to bigger questions. And then, so I went to seminary. And then after that, I went to study philosophy, because philosophy really is what, if you really want your biggest questions answered, or at least know the right questions to ask, that's where you have to go.
Rod Brunell, thank you for joining us. How about those Wahoos, Rod Brunell? Tim Ryan, thank you for joining us. Chris Turner in Richmond, thank you for joining us. Grace, thank you for watching in Richmond. Like and share the feed no matter where you were at, guys. Mean the world to us. Let's put this in perspective. I got to backtrack. You said Eagle Scout.
Yes, sir.
I mean, Eagle Scout is no joke.
It's not, yeah.
I made it as far as Weeblo. And my claim to fame with the Boy Scouts and Weeblo was I won the Pinewood Derby one year.
Nice.
After that, it was a struggle for me.
Yeah.
So someone who's able to climb as high as an Eagle Scout is able to stay committed, focus, is able to go from point A to B, is able to weather adversity, is able to get to, achieve a common goal.
Yeah.
And someone who has as many degrees and a PhD, especially as an engineer, as a philosopher, as someone who pursues religion, is someone that is a goal-oriented person.
Indeed, I am.
Okay, so
Yes.
my question for you is the 1 year, the 3 year, and the 5 year goal. You see where I'm going with
I
this
do
and why we're
indeed.
having this
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
What are the 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year goals for Brian Pinkston?
Right. I think it's best, at least for me, to start off with a life goal.
Okay.
My life goal
Sure.
is to serve people.
Okay.
My life goal is to live a life, like Bellamy Brown said on your show, a life of servant leadership. My life goal is to live out loving my neighbor as myself and figuring out all the ways that that works out. So for me, right here and right now, my 1 year goal now is to win city council.
Okay.
I don't
like that.
I don't jump into things without a desire to actually get to the end. My 3 year goal would be, if I'm successful in being elected, would be to work with the new council to, we'll talk about more of this later, I'm sure.
We will.
Yeah, it would be to help the new council figure out ways where we can sort of perhaps find our feet, find our ground, and then figure out ways to move forward. 5 year goal, we'll see. After that point, again, for me, it comes down to people. It comes down to taking these lofty ideas we learn about in philosophy or religion or our faith or whatever, or Boy Scouts for that matter, and putting rubber to road.
Elliot Harding, thank you for joining us. Elliot Harding, very active and one of the top dogs in the Republican Party locally. Scott Clothier, thank you for joining us. Harris, Denise Postlewhite joining us over there from Kilwins on the Charlottesville Downtown Mall. I got nothing but love for you, Denise. Let me throw this to you here. And this is actually, you know what? I'll go. If you guys want to connect with us, post a question, whatever Facebook feed you're watching. You can send me a direct message on Twitter. I'm watching it right now, or a DM on Instagram. I got a direct message coming in on Twitter. Send me an @ on Twitter as well. Just hit me up on any platform. We'll relay them to Brian. Brian, what separates you from the rest of your competition running for Charlottesville City Council? We know some of the candidates because they've been around the community longer. You are newer to the area. What is your value proposition and your separation point from your competition? Good question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Sounds like it's posed by a Darden MBA grad. I think, and I hit on some of this earlier, I do believe that I won't say that it's unique, but it's to an unusual degree, a level of empathy and compassion for really not just talking about helping the African American community, not just talking about affordable housing, but actually doing something about feeling that sort of desire and compassion to make a difference. That's wedded to I think a very thoughtful and reflective roll up your sleeves and let's figure out how to get it done. I am a business person. I don't own a business, but I've spent my whole life in commerce of one sort or another. I understand budgets. I understand schedules. I understand how to manage consultants and when you need to fire consultants. I understand what it's like to manage staff. I understand these things from a very practical perspective. And although I've only lived in the city proper 4 years, we've lived in Central Virginia for 14.
Okay.
Came here, we couldn't afford, like so many people, couldn't afford to live in the city, so we commuted from Greene. But I've been, here for quite a while. 14 years is a good long time, I think. Connected in through the university.
I like it. Sizzle reel that. That's a good answer right there. Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie Wells Rhodes. See you later today making some TV commercials. Corey LaMonica, thank you for joining us. Steve Jones, watching in Washington, D.C. We got Rick Rickelstein watching in Martinsville. We are live across the Commonwealth on the I Love CVille Show. Let me throw this to you. May I ask where in the city you live, roundabout?
Yes, I live up in Locust Grove on St. Charles Court.
That's a good spot.
It is.
That's a good spot.
Right up the street from Chief Longo.
I love it. I love it. So you moved from Greene County into the city limits. What prompted the move? Closer to work? Or you wanted to do this and you knew you had to live in city limits?
No, I did not know I wanted to do this.
Okay.
No, this was a very late addition to my plans, I can assure you. And my wife and I had some very serious conversations over the Christmas time this past Christmas about what in the world are you talking about? No, I love Charlottesville too, and for me, the university, the arc of my life has been a sort of progression from a deeply conservative, in some cases reactionary views about religion and politics and just how society functions, to one that's still grounded in, I think, good principles that was instilled in me as a child, but to a future and a present that I hope are more generous, more open-minded, more thoughtful, more empathetic. And I owe a lot of that to the University of Virginia. So coming to the University of Virginia, spending time in the philosophy department, being beaten up on intellectually, which is what you do in a philosophy department, figuring out, okay, what the heck do I actually believe and how much of this is just prejudice? What can I really support? That process for me was liberating. It sort of set my feet on a rock, so to speak. And then working in the university, the university is about a lot of things. If you're a staff member like I am, you have a different role than if you're a faculty member. But still, being on a part of the university community and the desire for service and to give back, and then all the amazing people that are here. I really believe bloom where you're planted. Our kids were at a point, it wasn't like we were going to move somewhere else. Our kids, were in schools. And so I knew, 6 or 7 years ago that I wanted to move in the city because I wanted to be close enough to where I could participate in lectures and things, all the amazing cultural events that happen at night. And I wanted to be in a community where I felt, frankly, more challenged intellectually than where we were living. And so when my salary finally rose to a point where I could afford a place to live,
we moved into the city.
Yeah.
Let's sizzle reel that, Harris Tolber. Let me throw this to you, and this is a question that's coming in via Twitter. Send me a DM on Twitter, on Instagram. Hit us up on one of the 7 channels you're watching. Laura Jackson, big fan of Laura Jackson. She says, Isaac Weintz is such a tremendous campaign manager. Y'all make a great team. Brian Pinkston, thank you, Laura Jackson, for watching the I Love CVille show. This is a DM that's coming in via Twitter, and Matt wants to know, how would you characterize your political ideology? That's a fair question.
It's an incredibly fair question. Yeah. And if you ask a philosopher that, you're going to get a very long answer. So I will give you the long answer.
We have no rules. You can go long.
Yeah, this is my show, right?
Yeah, that is your show.
Yeah, so in America, our political constraints, and I get so tired of these left and right spatial metaphors, but I guess that's what we have. In America, we are really constrained to, on the far left, if you want to call it that, a true socialism, and by that I mean the textbook notion of socialism, which is where the state owns the means of production. Now, a lot of people use that word socialism, and that's not what they mean. They really mean the state helping, being a social safety net. On the far right in our country, you have not only libertarians, but what people call sometimes conservatarians, and even you can go beyond that and have just a really highly nationalist view of things. Those views, that sort of spectrum is really an American spectrum. And if you sort of broaden the scope to think about, say, how societies are constructed in Europe or Britain, I would call myself a liberal in the British sense. So a liberal in the British sense means that I'm strongly libertarian in my views about social issues. I think what happens in pro-choice, for instance, I think that the relations between men and women in terms of how, you know what I'm talking about, in terms of like sexuality are places where the state has no role. I think that as much as possible, the state should stay out of people's business. But I'm more than just, there's different forms of liberalism. I'm also a liberal in the perspective of what some people would call a common good liberal, or a social justice liberal, in that I really believe the state has an important role to play in advancing equity for those who can't get there by themselves. So hardcore libertarians would say, basically, if you can't make it on your own, well, you're out of luck.
Keep going.
Right.
Yeah, keep going.
In terms of political philosophy, textbook philosophy, In terms of a true liberalism, what I would call a common good liberalism, a social liberalism, it's the notion of capitalism is still a valuable and good thing when it's been properly tamed, when the rules of engagement are fair. It is a view that says that we each, when we're embedded in a state with one another and in a culture, we have an obligation to each other, and we live out that obligation largely through taxes, and then those taxes, for instance, go to pay for the services we need to help those among us who need help to rise above. So that's sort of politically where I stand. I guess in the U.S. that makes me a liberal. I'm certainly a Democrat, a committed Democrat. Some would call me a centrist, moderate Democrat. I'm not the real far, I'm not a Bernie Sanders sort of Democrat.
I think Viola Starks, thank you for watching. Andre Xavier for CVille Hop on Tours, thank you for watching. Danny Mastermaker, the Pool Shark in Richmond, thank you for watching. What's up, Danny? I think you're somewhere in the middle, and I don't want to assume, that's why I'm asking the question. Yeah. I think you're somewhere in the middle of a Democrat and a libertarian. Somewhere in the middle of those two. We're in a world where classifications and categorizations are so prevalent, and I think that is because of the ubiquitous nature of social media. We have quickly become, what is this person? What is their job status? What is their relationship status? What are they feeling today? Because we're asked constantly on social media about this stuff. So somewhere in the middle of a Democrat and a libertarian. Why I asked that question is Charlottesville is a one-horse town. It is a one-party town. There has been one independent in the last 70 years who's won a spot on Charlottesville City Council, and that was Mayor Walker. And Mayor Walker, some can make a legitimate argument. I've heard Lloyd Snook make this argument. Paul Shockley, thank you for joining us. I've heard Lloyd Snook make this argument on the show. Mayor Walker won her spot on council in a lot of ways as an anomaly. Post 812, activists, very vocal in city council meetings.
Indeed.
And perhaps an anomaly. Bellamy Brown is trying to be the second independent to win a spot in Charlottesville City Council in 70 years. And Bellamy Brown, in a lot of ways, I think is a conservative. Okay? I think he leans very conservative with his ideology. He may be a little, what should I say, more reserved in saying that. And why he's more reserved in saying that is because it's a Democratic ideology town. Where I'm going with this with you look at the candidates that are running for Charlottesville City Council. Michael Payne, who's running for Charlottesville City Council, you could make a legitimate argument is on the socialist side. You can make a legitimate argument while Lloyd Snook has said, I've been a Democrat my whole life. He is perhaps more on the conservative side of the spectrum with the candidates that are running. So I think we have this vast array. While we don't have a lot of diversification from a race standpoint, I mean, let's cut to the chase. The folks that are running on the Democratic ticket are all white.
Indeed.
Okay, all white. Bellamy Brown is an African-American. He's running as an independent. So there's not a ton of diversification. Here's where I'm going with this. How would you characterize the 2019 Charlottesville City Council candidates that are running for 3 spots on Charlottesville City Council?
Are you asking me to classify each one,
no,
or just sort of a general?
In general terms, what do you think of the competition?
Right.
And you can go anywhere you want here, Brian.
Sure, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, you said this very well, that we feel this need to put labels on people. Who's the most progressive, who's the most this or that. It used to be, progressivism 100 years ago was someone like Theodore Roosevelt. And then we learned sometimes the word progressive was hijacked at some point in its history to mean civic projects that, urban renewal. And now progressivism is for some people like to the left of a liberal. Where I grew up, all my family are very conservative Republicans, so they think I've lost my freaking mind, even being associated with Democrats.
And that usually comes with higher education.
Well, I won't say that.
It does. Higher education breeds a democratic mindset. Isn't that fair?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay, all right.
Okay?
You don't have to answer.
I appreciate you saying that.
I feel like it does. But go on. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's fine. So, again, I do think that the labels that we use in the U.S. are different than the ones, for instance, political scientists would use, or if you read a magazine like The Economist would use. But to your point, it's really neither here nor there. And one of the first rules of Charlottesville politics is to not criticize your opponents. With that said, I do think what you are getting at is sort of what are the differences of vision here?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
What are the issues of substance? And so I do think that you see, and this is really coming, I think, a lot from the activist community, is a feeling of being pissed off and angry that you've had all of this. We do have runaway capitalism at some levels in our country. That's not the case here, but it's a kind of capitalism that it works for some people, but not for other people. You also have people that are furious that we've been talking about equity and race and all these wonderful things we're going to do to help those among us who need it the most, and yet we're not putting our money where our mouth is, literally.
Right.
And so you have I would call the sort of central activist core, which is active mostly at the university and in the downtown part of the city, that is making really strong points about it's time to move on and let's resolve these things. Now, I would say that some people, for instance, perhaps Mr. Payne, would have a different view, perhaps, of how business community might help with that, or how capitalism in general might be helpful for that than I would, or perhaps I'm not going to speak for Lloyd. I think that these petty fight, I call them petty fights, the arguments that we have between the Downtown Business Association, for instance, and the needs of the African American community, for instance, or housing affordability. I think these things are silly. I think that both are part of having a thriving city, that we need both. And so I guess I would characterize myself as understanding that you need a thriving commercial culture, you need a thriving business culture, you need people coming into the city to keep it vibrant. It was developers, as much as people don't like to talk, or really redevelopers, that basically kept the downtown mall from falling under 20 years ago. They renovated all these places. So I think that is a legitimate point to make, and we need to honor that. On the other hand, we need to stop just paying lip service to the things that activists are talking about. They are making good points that we all need to listen to.
All right, you know what? I'm going to give you props.
Thank you.
Let's sizzle reel that, okay? And let's thank some of the folks that are watching right now. We have Raven Williams-Fisher watching in Richmond. What's up, Raven? Brent Walters, the North Carolina racquetball champion. Brent, are you a 9-time racquetball champion? Put it in the feed. I'm looking forward to playing you, Brent Walters. This is what I'm going to throw to you, okay? I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. I put my entire life savings into this business in 2008 in the midst of a recession, $32,000. My life savings at the time. Did not have a single client for 7 months, was going to the Pana Garden buffet, and the guys here have heard this story at nauseum to the point where they're like, Jerry, you're really going to tell us again? But it's literally what motivates me. Right. $32,000, 7 months in, not a single client, going to the Pana Garden buffet by Lambeth, where I was a student the second year at the University of Virginia, and literally was stealing Chinese food from the buffet with Ziploc bags, and that was my food for 2 days and my dog's food for 2 days. And when I wasn't doing that, I was lifting up seat cushions at my friends' homes, looking for $1.03 or $1.04 in change to eat a double cheeseburger, and that was my meal for the day. Okay? And then I got one client, did well by that client, always under-promised and over-delivered. Got the second client, they told 3 other clients, and then it snowballed. Now we own a lion's share of a building and have a thriving advertising agency, and we're helping team members buy homes.
Right.
Okay? Where I'm going with this is this. Ladies and gentlemen, we talk about affordable housing, and we talk about equity, and we talk about doing what's right for folks across the city of Charlottesville. I will tell you, if Charlottesville is going to be in a bad spot, you allow the economy to go into the tank, and we don't prioritize small businesses, and we don't prioritize entrepreneurial mindset, and we don't do well by the businesses that are employing people, and we don't do well by, or we put so much red tape and bureaucracy in place that entrepreneurs aren't even willing to get in the game, that is when we will really see Charlottesville become a bad spot. What we need to do is we need to celebrate and champion, and we need to put on a pedestal the small business owners in our community across Central Virginia, not just Charlottesville. And we need to make being an entrepreneur more approachable and less bureaucratic. And it's a lot of what you're saying here, because if we make small business and mid-cap and large-cap businesses, if we make them want to leave, like Oliver Kutner is doing his development in Lynchburg, like Alan Kajin not wanting to do anything else with City Hall.
Yeah.
Like the developer saying, Keith Woodard saying hell no to an $80 million development on Water Street, saying I'm just going to pull the plug despite having $1.2 million of his own money into the project. If we have more stuff like that happen, that's when Charlottesville's going to be in trouble.
Right. Right. And I don't disagree with really anything that you're saying. I think that prizing the entrepreneurial spirit is a huge part of what's made this city the place that it is.
Yes.
And so, but I would like to step back just a hair.
Please.
And so I really, and this may seem sort of mamby-pamby or atmospheric, but I would like to move beyond either or language and talk about both and. Because the needs of, for instance, I'm sure you've heard of the Orange Dot report, right?
Yes.
By Rich Schuyler, and the fact that 25% of people in the city struggle with poverty. I'm sure you know all the efforts being done with like the Network to Work program that he's doing, and the Go program, which is putting people that lack credentials, to helping them get a credential so that they can then participate in part of the workforce. So trying to build these sort of virtuous cycles where a business is part of the solution. So it's not just part of the solution, it is part of the solution. And people are talking about this I guess the numbers go around and round, but this notion for the affordable housing, I think the last I heard, $10 million a year for 15 years or something like that. Well, that's only the city's piece of that. The other piece of that is outside investors helping to make that happen. So you're right, we don't need to demonize investors, and we certainly don't need to demonize entrepreneurs, but we've got to think about all of this in terms of the entire city. This is a very highly stratified city. It's not uncommon for university towns. You bring in lots of bright people that are creating all kinds of wonder drugs and amazing stuff at the university, lots of students who drive the housing prices up. And then this is also a southern city. And so you have the legacy of slavery and all of these things of racism. We feel like, Jim Crow is like Martin Luther King had a dream speech and everything is fixed. But if you've lived in poverty, or you've lived in a sort of a situation like apparently Mayor Walker has, and that sort of perspective, for folks if you have that sort of perspective and that's been your history, I think it's incumbent, particularly on white, affluent people, relatively affluent people like myself, to really stop and listen carefully. What are people telling me? Why do they feel excluded from the city? Why do they feel like they can't go to the downtown mall? What can I do? What can we do to marry up the business community to make things better for everyone? And again, I love it when we have these win-win situations like what Rich Schuyler's doing, where you connect people who need a credential, help them get in the workplace. The other thing cool that's happening is with Habitat. So many, if you think about it, if you're a white person, right, probably you got some head start in your life, even if you didn't think about it, because your family owned a home, your parents or grandparents. So they built home equity, and maybe that turned into a college fund for you or for me, right? Well, if you were African American up until the 60s, you were largely shut out of the housing market. So you didn't have a chance to build that equity and wealth that so many of us have. And so what's so cool about Habitat is helping people get in homes. They own the home, so there's the capitalism piece. There's the value of having private property, right? And they're able to get into these homes for like $1,000 for a down payment and then build equity. And that is an intergenerational way to conquer poverty.
That's a generational impact. Let's sizzle reel something right there. There was some quality stuff right there. Brent says six-time men's open singles champion in North Carolina, 18 times including doubles and mixed state champions. Brent Walters, good people. Sarah Hill Buczynski, thank you for watching the show. And Crozet, Earl Grey Jacobs, Xavier Hobbs, thank you for watching. Like and share the feed. This is what my problem is, okay? And this is, you know, and I enjoy the conversation. You are a deep thinker. I can tell that you and I would have hours of conversation over some cold beers and just have a good time talking about, I love this kind of conversation. So here's my biggest issue, okay? And I'm going to cut to the chase, and this you know, this is going to be a very pointed comment.
Okay.
I think, and I follow Mayor Walker and some of the comments that she makes on Facebook very closely, and some of the comments that she makes in City Council very closely. And I think a lot of times she, and I'll use the word that you did, demonize.
Okay.
Okay. She is oftentimes demonizing development and entrepreneurship and capitalism. And I am a social entrepreneur.
Right.
I also call myself a conscious capitalist.
Right.
We run a for-profit business that is 11 years old in May.
Right.
And we are focused on keeping our business in the black, because if we know our business stays in the black, we can give these folks raises, hire new people,
Yep.
and we can continue doing good things in the community.
Right.
While keeping our business in the black, we have donated over $113,000 to nonprofits and charities across Central Virginia, or helped do endeavors.
Yeah.
We're working on one currently with the 100 Black Men of Central Virginia organization, with an I Love CVille festival in the Ix Art Park that could happen this fall, where we would literally be doing a festival to help raise money for this organization to fill an executive director's position. That's their goal, is to have an executive director next year.
Right.
Okay, so here's where I'm going with
Plus,
this.
you're doing this.
This right here
Right.
is a freaking labor of love.
Yeah.
Okay, this is hard.
Yeah.
4 people do this.
Right.
Okay, not just one guy on a microphone.
Got
Him, her.
Got it.
Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. When Mayor Walker is demonizing development and capitalism and entrepreneurship because it is being prioritized over affordable housing or whatever it may be, that is not long-term thinking from my standpoint. If we celebrate and champion and prioritize entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurs and conscious capitalists, and we give them a platform to grow and boom and blossom their businesses, then the byproducts of that are potentially affordable housing. The byproducts of that are more revenue that comes from building buildings that can be used for affordable housing or schools or roads or infrastructure.
Yep.
So I just think it's short-term thinking.
Yes.
I'm going to get out of your way. Your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with you, largely. I won't comment directly on Mayor Walker's, Facebook.
Well, you're running a
posts.
campaign. I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we all bring our perspectives to things, right? I mean, that's commonplace. And she's clearly bringing a perspective that is a harder, more hard scrabble one than I grew up with. And, her comments about Charlottesville, and there's clearly some, she has a perspective that's informed by her life history. My perspective on Charlottesville is very different. I've already mentioned to you how I love the place. Your perspective is as well. Yes, business and entrepreneurship has to be part of the solution. And again, I consider myself a business person. That's the world that I live in. What I think we have to, particularly as white people, and I hate to bring this up, but I think that we have to just be so thoughtful about, if I had a particular life story in people.
You're talking about white privilege.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I hate that word, but fine. If I had a particular life story that was different, how would that inform my views now? And what people are saying, I don't know. I wasn't here 40 years ago. I've spoken to a lot of former city council people who've worked very hard to integrate the schools over time, who felt like they were doing good work to help the African American community. But clearly there's a large contingent of people in the city who think it was not enough. What I would hope is that Mayor Walker would see that business is part of the solution. I would also hope that the business community would realize that, you know, the promise of trickle-down economics or whatever hasn't really worked out for our nation as a whole. That there is a place for taxes, unfortunately. No one likes to pay taxes. But we need both of these elements to work. I mean, that sounds sort of Pollyanna-ish, but it really is true. You cannot undercut the people that are making your city vibrant. On the other hand, if you have people coming in for this new code building or whatever, they're going to drive up housing like San Francisco or someplace, then that's not good for anyone, right? And so,
Center of Developing Entrepreneurs, Joffrey Woodruff's project going at the Ice Park, where he's going to put his portfolio of businesses that he's invested in, and he's going to put them and position them on the where the Ice Park currently was. And he is making very good points. Dude, you're a libertarian. You're very libertarian in mindset, and I appreciate that. But Joffrey Woodruff, who's in the building across the street right now from the second floor of this building, what he is trying to do is portfolio or house his companies in one spot, make sense, vertical integration, give them resources like in-house accountants, in-house lawyers, food courts, just make it easier for their businesses to prosper and grow, which then makes him money. And he is saying, if I do this, then I'm putting more people on the downtown mall with disposable income that could then patronize the shops and the merchants on the downtown mall because they have disposable income. They then could potentially purchase houses around the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, and by purchasing these houses, the real estate taxes then can be allocated and used for schools, roads, bike lanes, whatever it may be. Now, the byproduct of doing that, and Peyton Alley and Bobby Castine, thank you for watching the show, the byproduct of that is we have a satellite office in New Providence, New Jersey. Okay, I go up there once a week every 90 days. New Providence, New Jersey is a white island. And why it's a white island is because it's a bedroom community of Manhattan. So people that are working in Manhattan are 45 minutes away from New Providence. They're taking New York City salaries, and they're living in New Providence, which is driving up the cost of living for everybody, as you know. Okay, that literally is going to happen in Charlottesville. And I think another good example you made was San Francisco. Okay. 55% of the housing stock in the city of Charlottesville is zoned R1, and an R1 zoning means it's for single-family detached homes only, which negatively impacts the amount of density that can be held in the city of Charlottesville from a rental standpoint. What can be done about this?
Well, so you say I'm a libertarian. Fair enough. In many respects, I would agree with that. But here's the flip side, and here's where I'm going to throw in a twist.
I'm enjoying this. Are you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's helpful to get a little feedback along the way.
You're doing people are saying you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I believe, you know, the French call it solidarity. Okay, whatever word you want to use. In America, we have this real strong aversion, particularly in the Republican Party, of ever feeling like I owe anyone anything, right? I get that. We all believe we brought ourselves up by our bootstraps. But I think where I differ a little bit is there is a time and a place for city government. Let's face it, at the national level and the state level, there's been this move for the last 30 years to slash taxes, right? Trickle-down economics is going to fix everything. What we've got is we've got a national, you know, if you look at our Gini coefficient and you look at how our income has gotten so out of whack and our wealth even worse, it's making people throughout the whole country feel like they don't have a piece of the American dream, right? Unfortunately, and people feel that way here. People that have lived in this community for, you know, their families lived here are being priced out by gentrification. That's how they feel anyway. We may feel like, well, this is just development, it's all a good thing. And maybe it is intention. But my point is that for this city to thrive, for it to flourish, for the people that are here now to continue to work well together, there has to be a realization on the part of the business community and, frankly, on the part of homeowners that the sort of social justice issues that we're facing and the things that the common good requires of us also involve revenue, right? And they involve taxation, and they involve the contribution. And that's the part that's hard to sell to people. So one of the things that I hope my candidacy is about is, again, you have this sort of, I call it the Twitter sphere or whatever.
Yeah.
The social media world kind of lives on its own, particularly, the university and downtown is my perception. But then you've got when you canvass.
I think that's fair.
When you canvass, and I've knocked on over 1,200 doors. Our campaign has knocked on like 1,500 doors.
Really?
Yeah, we're out in the neighborhood. So we're everywhere from Greenberry to Friar Springs, Tonsler, every place, and we're going to hit the whole city, right? What you find is that even though this is a quote, my family thinks I live in a liberal bubble, right? They all think.
So does my family.
Right.
Yeah.
And in some ways we have, but we do. But if you go talk to homeowners, you talk to people out in the neighborhoods, they are very practical people who are concerned about their housing valuations. So,
as they should be.
Yeah, so they want to contribute to the common good. They would love to have better schools, but they're like, what the hell? I mean, my housing valuations continue to go up, but now you want to add more taxes on top of it.
Right.
So
it's rare that both happen at the same time.
Right.
With real estate taxes and assessments.
Right. So I'm not proposing an answer to that particular conundrum.
Right.
I'm just admitting that it is a conundrum. It is something that we need to think about. And what I want to be is, if you want to call it, I don't mean to be overly grand, some sort of bridge or link between this
liaison.
Whatever, yeah, some word between the really, intense social justice activists who I think are making good points. Nakia Walker is making points we need to hear, with the rest of the community who I've not met a single person in this community who I feel like his or her heart was not in the right place. They just want to know how their money is being spent, how their taxes are being spent, why in the world they're being asked to pay more in taxes when valuations are going up. And again, I don't have an answer to all those questions. I do have a business mindset and feel like in the budget, I can get into that. But my point is simply to admit and agree that we are facing some real hard circles to square. Now, one thing I will give, and this may be cold comfort, I was talking to Meredith Richards, who was a 2-term city councilor, a lovely, lovely person. She said in her time and era, they were facing the opposite problem. People were leaving Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got, and one way you can look at it as a good problem, people wanting to come to Charlottesville, which is driving things up. So it depends on how you
The
look.
best and worst thing that ever happened to the city of Charlottesville, and put me on a one shot here, Harris. Okay, the best and worst thing, I'm going to repeat this again. The best and worst thing that ever happened to the city of Charlottesville was every national publication in the country calling the city of Charlottesville the best place to live in the United States.
That's right. That's exactly
okay?
right. That's
That is
exactly
the
right.
best and worst thing. It's the best thing because the people who were living in Charlottesville, their property values began to skyrocket. It's the worst thing because it started bringing money from all over the country into the city of Charlottesville, and this money from all over the country, money from Yankee money, New York money, literally was coming into the city of Charlottesville and was driving up the cost of real estate left and right because people were willing to spend an extra $50,000, an extra $30,000, an extra $60,000 on a home because they were used to their properties being in New York or Long Island or whatever it
That's
may
right.
be, $750,000, $800,000, $900,000.
That's right.
So when they came in here and they were able to get a 4,000 square foot McMansion on a half acre, they weren't hesitant to spend an extra $25,000.
That's right.
The best and worst thing. Neil Williamson, who I have tremendous respect for, I follow him very closely. He says this is a phenomenal discussion.
He's a good man.
He's a good man. He's very reasonable in his thinking.
He is.
He has a question for you.
Okay.
Okay. He says, does the city of Charlottesville have a responsibility for providing parking for downtown businesses and residents? Is Brian committed to the construction of the Guadalajara lot? I'll give the background on it and get out of your way.
Wow, Neil, holy
yeah.
cow. I thought we were buddies. Just kidding.
During the Charlottesville parking wars with Mark Brown and the city of Charlottesville were going toe-to-toe, mano a mano, basically a boxing and fighting match at the Water Street Garage. And as a leverage point, the city of Charlottesville purchased Guadalajara on Market Street and Lucky 7 on Market Street and made the threat, whether realistic or not, that they were going to tear down Guadalajara on Market Street and Lucky 7 on Market Street and build a parking garage there. And with that leverage point, they were going to say, Mark, we don't need you in the Water Street garage. We're going to build our own. So that's the background on it. Neil wants to know, does the city of Charlottesville have a responsibility for providing parking for downtown businesses and residents? And are you committed to the construction of the Guadalajara lot?
You know, that is a really
That's a good question.
super duper question. And I must confess, I have not thought sufficiently about the parking situation, except to say this. When I've met with downtown business leaders, I've met with Joan Fenton, it comes up all the time.
Joan Fenton.
Yeah, it comes up all the time about parking. So clearly something needs to be done. I'm sorry, Neil. I'm not prepared to make a full statement about. It certainly makes a lot of sense. I think that we should be committed. Okay, I'm thinking of this on the fly.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I think that if we want, so the people that I've spoken to want to have a thriving downtown business culture, right? To do that, we need either better public transportation or we need better parking. And so, yes, that would seem to be something that would be an aspect of the common good, which would make sense for the city to invest in. Now, with that said, I would need to know more about the cost per spot, and the value proposition of all that.
The devil's advocate of that point, and I'm playing devil's advocate for the sake of a show. Okay. Obviously, I have, own a part of a building and want downtown to thrive, so I have skin in the game here. But the devil's advocate part of that is there should be a de-emphasis on vehicle and parking.
I agree with that.
And more of an emphasis on public transportation,
I agree with that too.
Walking, bikes, Lime, and Bird scooters.
Yeah. Yeah, those Lime and Bird scooters, I sure hope someone doesn't meet an early demise because of those things. But yes, that is a very valid point. But I think, like so many things, we've got to move from the present into the future, and these transitional phases are important. And parking is a huge part of that. And so I think that is I'm going to have to think about it some more, Neil, but thank you for the question. And yeah.
Your comrade, Bellamy Brown, watching right now.
Hi, Bellamy. How are you?
Relay something to Brian Pinkston, Bellamy Brown. Bellamy Brown, we were giving you some love here earlier on the show. Elliot Harding, big-time guy in the Republican Party locally, he has this to say. Okay. We all have a duty to assist others.
Yes.
But that duty doesn't stem from the government forcing folks to make that decision. Community erodes when people are compelled into this contributory system, whereas community flourishes when the sense of duty grows organically and voluntarily, specifically nonprofits, churches, corporate responsibility, charity, random and small acts of kindness. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so Elliot and I overlapped briefly on the Region 10 board. I have a lot of respect for Elliot. What he's stating there is what political philosophers would call the night watchman notion of liberalism, or what in America we would call libertarianism. I respectfully disagree. It does not have to be either or. Obviously, nonprofits, community, church, all of those things have to be a part of it. But this idea, and it's really embedded in Republican ideology all the way down to its, I was nursed on this at my political growing up. This notion that once government gets involved and once you start taking money from taxes from people, then all of a sudden you've created this, socialist and people are going to stop working. I just reject it, Elliot. No offense. I think you're a wonderful person. I respect your ideas.
We can respectfully disagree.
Yeah, but I think I fundamentally disagree with it. I mean, the government has a role, has throughout human history. Governments have played a crucial role, not just in defending the borders and all these things that Republicans, are exercised about, but in helping society flourish. It's part of how we, what does it mean to love your neighbor in the context of a post-Enlightenment, industrial age, modern society? Well, we don't all live in neighborhoods anymore. We're embedded in this large social structure. And part of the way we do that is through, unfortunately, taxes. I hate it. It sucks. But that is part of how...
Taxes are regressive. They're regressive.
No.
That's okay. Explain. Let's go back and forth on this one, and I'll say mine. You say yours.
What do you mean by regressive? In that they tax the poor more than the rich?
Okay, let's take real estate
Because typically
taxes.
when people say the word regressive versus progressive, a regressive tax is like something like a meals tax, which...
I will. Let me throw this to you, and then I'll get out of your way. And then I've enjoyed this conversation. I enjoy your philosophical nature.
I've got one more important thing I'd like to say about the end of this before we leave.
You can do anything you want. You can do anything you
This is
want.
1:34.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have...
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Me too. I'm going to take it from a real estate taxes standpoint. Okay? We are, in fact, the budget passed. So the real estate taxes are going up. I
didn't know the real estate. I thought it was just...
meals and lodging.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what I'm going to throw to you. Okay. When you consider raising real estate taxes, landlords, and I'm speaking firsthand with 23 tenants, landlords insulate themselves from increased real estate taxes through triple net leases and through yearly escalators that are 4% and 5% high.
Right.
Why we do this is to protect ourselves from bureaucrats and politicians of eroding profit margins.
Sure.
So instead of raising real estate taxes and saying this is going to make the wealthy or the landlords pay more to a fund that's then going to be allocated to affordable housing, that's the antithesis of what happens.
Right.
What ends up happening is those increased taxes get passed down to the tenants.
Correct.
And the tenants are the ones that have their margins eroded. And then that impacts the most impoverished citizens in the community as opposed to the ones that bureaucrats and politicians were trying to target.
Correct.
And that particular circumstance, I made a fairly compelling argument that real estate taxes are regressive and doing the opposite of benefiting the folks that they were trying to benefit.
I think that is an incredibly fair point to make about real estate taxes.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are more versions. And again, I want to be clear. I'm not proposing any sort of specific tax increase.
Yeah, we're spitballing.
Right. I'm just simply saying that we have needs and we have revenue. Okay. Those are the pieces that we have to put. And those aren't the only levers. To Elliot's point, we have, the work of churches and so forth and so on. But at least one lever that we have has to do with revenue and the role of city government in helping people's lives get better. If you talk about taxes in general, and you talk about large-scale taxes like income tax at the state and national level, right, and the way corporations are taxed, right, those taxes, let's be clear, the people that are benefiting from that are shareholders. They're people that have the money to, have enough accountants to wealthy people. You look at the data, and it's very clear over the course of the last quarter century that taxation policy at an income tax level has benefited the wealthy at the expense of everyone else. Now, the problem we have, and Kathy Galvin pointed this out, and I think she's exactly right. We Section 8 HUD housing, right? We don't have the level of help from federal and state sources that we get block grants and so forth and so on. But at the level of a city, right, we don't have the sort of outside funding that we need, and so we're being forced to rely on our own devices. The problem that we face, and this is where I think reasonable people will disagree, it's where I haven't completely made up my mind, we'll have to see the data, okay, quite frankly, is we have real needs in this community. We need, our schools are not in a good situation facilities-wise. They need these investments that the school board is asking for. I think it's a no-brainer. But again, how do you pay for these things? And I will be the first to say, putting it all on the homeowners is not fair, particularly when their valuations are going up. Putting it all on taxing and lodging. Travis Wilburn made the point, I don't know if you know Travis.
Oh, I know Travis well. He comes on the show.
He made
comments
the point,
frequently.
He made the point recently to me in conversation that we're dealing with this new convention center that's coming in, and so raising our tax for that may force people to go into Albemarle. All of these are legitimate points, and I think that the role of a city councilor is not to come in and say, and this is where I disagree with some of my rivals, is I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, we're going to fix affordable housing this way and that. It's to be thoughtful about the landscape. It's to realize how complex it is. It's to try to, I like density. Density is a great one. People say, let's all get rid of R1 zoning. Well, I'll tell you something. People out in the neighborhoods love their R1 zoning. It's built the physical character of their neighborhood. It's what they think is part of great about being in Charlottesville. On the other hand, we are going to need more dense living, right, if we're going to deal with affordable housing. The point that I wanted to make...
Please. And we're going to turn this into a sizzle reel for you.
Okay. Well, hopefully I don't get burned by that process.
Oh, you're going to get burned. Why? You're about to say something ballsy?
Well, I don't know.
He's going to say something ballsy here.
I'm just saying in general.
I like you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like you,
You're
too.
a straight shooter.
I endeavor in my life to be honest, to follow the facts where they lead, even if it's to painful conclusions, which is how I ended up moving from being a deeply conservative Republican to now...
You've evolved.
To now being running for city council in a liberal
Charlottesville,
bastion.
Virginia.
Okay,
Yeah.
So, follow the facts. One of the great stories that's come out of the last year is Jim Ryan at the university. And I'm friends with Juan Diego Wade. You probably have heard of this working group that's been put together, town and gown relationships. I've got a copy of the report in my...
I do. I know the report.
Yeah, so the 4 areas that talked about healthcare, education, housing, and work, right? And so Juan is a friend of mine. He's on the school board. He's my neighbor. He's actually endorsed my campaign, I'm proud to say. He's one of the members of the like a co-chair, and I don't remember who the person is from the university. I think that we're at one of the things we need to realize in terms of the whole. If you look at this as a system, right? One of the key external parameters to the city, obviously, is the university. We all love the university. It's our university. We're so proud when the NCAA happened. It is. Our university, and we are its city. And having this symbiotic relationship, and the same goes for the county as well, having these sorts of symbiotic relationships and recognizing that, for instance, housing policy at the university affects, and students that come in, affect real estate. Having those sorts of conversations, I think, are ways to move these discussions forward as opposed, to continuing to. So and just to be very clear, I'm a lowly staff member at the university. I in no way represent anyone at the university. These are the opinions of a private citizen. But I am optimistic after reading that report and after hearing President Ryan talk about not just being great, but being good. And that's his mantra. And he talks about the common good, And so he's got this same desire of... let's look for ways in which we lift the whole community up as opposed to just one aspect of it. I have a lot of optimism that good things are going to come out of that.
Sizzle that, Harris Tolber. Well, I hope so, because the University of Virginia, from my standpoint, and I went to the University of Virginia needs to step it up. And I think under Jim Ryan's leadership, and this is me saying this, not you saying, and it's easier for me to say it because I'm not an employee of the University of Virginia, but the University of Virginia for so long has been more concerned with endowment and U.S. News and World Report rankings and not as concerned as the city of Charlottesville and its future. And as the epicenter of employment, which is the University of Virginia, in a lot of ways, it's not the city of Charlottesville, it's the city of UVA. It needs to step its game up big time and needs to contribute more money from that billion-plus endowment to the West Main streetscape. It needs to contribute more of its money not to building parking garages, but to creating a solution for affordable housing. And the University of Virginia needs to be perhaps the champion and the linchpin and the influence and the motivator behind improving the pitiful public transportation system that is in Charlottesville and across Central Virginia. And I'm going to go ahead and say that and create that into a sizzle reel right there, Harris Tolber, because that was on point. I'm going to give you the show. Okay, and we'll create another sizzle reel. You connect with the camera here, and this is what we'll throw to you. And Kimmy Kruskamp, who's the head of the Greene County Chamber of Commerce, said, Brian, I love that. Follow the facts. That was on point right there from Kimmy. I'm going to get out of the way. We'll create this as sizzle reel. Here's an open-ended question. Why should Charlottesville, Virginia, vote for Brian Pinkston in the June 11th primary for Charlottesville City Council?
I think Charlottesville should vote for me because I certainly hope and pray that I combine a real sense of compassion and empathy for those in most need of it in this community, and that the social justice activists are pointing out to us and that we need to listen to, with a very, I hope, thoughtful, reflective business approach to actual problem solving. Realizing that we have these significant needs in our community that need to be addressed ethically, we need to do that, and also for the common good. But that I also really care and value the middle class and upper middle class voters in this city who foot the bill. They're tax and businessmen and women who foot the bill for these things. And again, I would like us to try to move beyond either or to talk about both and. That is hard work. That is the work of governance. That's the work of compromise, of moving past petty disagreements and really thinking through positive solutions. It's to move past Twitter and this and that and easy points, and to really get together and say, how are we going to simultaneously address these historic inequities that are real while also maintaining a quality of life for people that have lived here in our neighborhoods and who fund services, and again, as well as business men and women. I think that as a project manager, as someone who's worked in different parts of the country, and who also has a deep love, I didn't bring this up because of my philosophy perspective, a deep love for the humanities, so a comprehension of sociology and history and anthropology and how all these things play together. I think that I have just an interesting and unique combination of gifts and abilities that would be valuable in City Council.
Sizzle reel that. We'll send that to Brian. We will get you all the content within 2 business days. I'm going to under-promise and over-deliver. We'll say close of business Friday. The content will come before that. You'll have photos. The story will be featured on ilovecville.com. The show, I thought you did a job well done.
Thank you.
I really appreciated our conversation. I look forward to having a couple cold beers with you.
Nice.
I think you are a deep thinker. It's obvious you're committed to Charlottesville. It's obviously you want the betterment of CVille. You go in with a mindset to City Council, should you win a spot, that I'm not going to draw the line in the sand. I'm going to be malleable and adaptable and see where the marketplace and where various groups of people want to go. And then I'm going to be the liaison or the connector between these groups and their ideas and their goals, and help everyone reach a common goal, and help hedge and help find a foundation that fits, that is the best for everybody.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Our pleasure. We'll do it again. Next thing we should do is we should get you in a roundtable discussion with some of the other candidates.
I would love that.
Yeah, because I think it would be enjoyable.
I do think there would be value in us having sort of
Different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, different perspectives where people can see them, and you're able to do it in a very pleasant way, which I like. Not everybody can do that.
I'm glad to hear that.
A lot of people do it where they feel combative and they need to feel like aggressively that they have to win every argument.
Yeah.
You can do it in a way where you're like, all right, well, we'll agree to disagree, like you did with Elliot Harding. Yeah. So we'll, Judah, you welcome Brian out there for us. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
We're truly
Appreciate
grateful.
you having me. Thank you all.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Harris Tolber is our director. I want to get Harris Tolber in the mix. Your thoughts? Anywhere you want to go, Harris Tolber, on this conversation, this interview. The show is yours, Harris Tolber.
Yeah, Jerry. Brian comes from a very interesting background, especially in education. Comes from a background of engineering and theology, which are very clashing schools of thought in a lot of ways. But the funny thing is that when I went to James Madison University, a lot of my acquaintances that were very religious, interestingly, were had majors in very scientific subjects. So a lot of times, and in fact, some of them said that, you know, like for example, I had a friend that very religious Christian and was a biology major, and he was explaining to me that the two go hand in hand much more than we think, and I think that was true in Brian's general outlook. Incredibly intelligent guy.
Yeah.
You know, really is taking a step back and looking at Charlottesville as a whole and trying to implement policies that are good for everyone. And I think that's what his whole like platform is about, I would say.
Yeah, I was impressed, and I'll close it down by saying this is, I respect anybody who's willing to come on this set and spend 76 minutes with me talking about things that are vulnerable, that require courage to answer, that are a lot of times conversations that people, for some reason or another, society has said, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion. Okay, well, when you're running for politics, guess what? You're going to be talking about politics, you're going to be talking about religion, and you're going to be talking about issues that lead to vulnerability and require courage to answer. So anyone who's willing to spend 76 minutes with me on this set and answer the questions that I threw to them, I have respect and props for, and not everybody that is in Charlottesville government is willing to do that. 95% of them are, and 95% of them do, but there's some that do not. And I'll leave it at that. I'm going to close by saying the entire premise of this program is not to endorse any candidates whatsoever, but the entire premise of this program is to have a dialogue and a discussion for you, Charlottesville, for you, Central Virginia, for you, Albemarle County, and for you, the Commonwealth in totality, to learn from the people that we spotlight, whether you like them, whether you don't, whether you agree with them, whether you disagree with them. It's a platform for you to get more educated about what's transpiring in our community, because I feel like when you're more educated about what's transpiring in our community, you're empowered and you have more knowledge to equip yourself with choices and with votes and to do what's right and what's wrong from your personal standpoint. So that's the concept of the show, is to leave Charlottesville, Central Virginia, and the Commonwealth in a better place than we first arrived. Thank you to Brian Pinkston for joining us. Thank you to Harris Tolber for directing this program, Judah Wickower and Lauren Linsky for producing the show. We close the program the same way every single time. A, if you give more than you take, you will make Charlottesville a better place. Tony Bennett, men's basketball coach, embodies the give more than you take mindset. And guess what? You will probably win in the end. So give more than you take. B, embody the golden rule. When you treat others as you want to be treated yourself, you will make Charlottesville, Central Virginia, the Commonwealth a better place. Treat others like you want to be treated yourself. Seems easy to do, but so many people do not. Please embody the golden rule. My name is Jerry Miller. It's the I Love CVille Show on the I Love CVille Network. We're back tomorrow, 12:30, right in this chair to connect with you. Have a good afternoon.